A rule of thumb says that the total cost of holding stock is around 25% of its value a year. You might think that minimizing this cost is the same as minimizing the stock, but this is not necessarily true. If a shop holds no stock at all, it certainly has no inventory costs, but it also has no sales and effectively incurs another cost of losing customers. Then a reasonable option is to balance the cost of holding stock and making sales with the cost of having no stock and losing sales. Before going into more detail, we should look at the different costs to stock. They are usually divided into four types. Unit cost is the price of an item charged by the supplier or the cost to the organization of acquiring one unit of the item. It may be fairly easy to find this by looking at quotations or recent invoices from suppliers, but it is more difficult when several suppliers offer slightly different products or offer different purchasing conditions. If a company makes the item itself, it may be difficult to get a reliable production cost or set a transfer price. Reorder costs. The cost of placing a repeat order for an item. This might include allowances for preparing an order, correspondence, delivery, insurance, receiving, unloading, checking, testing, use of equipment, and follow-up. Sometimes a range of other costs can be included, such as quality control, sorting, repackaging, movement of received goods, and so on. In practice, the best estimate for the reorder cost often comes from dividing the total annual cost of the purchasing department by the number of orders it sends out. Holding cost, the cost of holding one unit of an item in stock for a unit period of time. The obvious cost is startup money, which is either borrowed, in which case there are interest payments, or it is cash that could be put to other uses, in which case there are opportunity costs. Other holding costs are for storage space, risks, and services. These costs vary widely. Shortage costs occurs when an item is needed, but it cannot be supplied from stock. In the simplest case, a retailer loses direct profit from a sale, but the effects of shortages are usually much wider and include lost goodwill, loss of reputation, and loss of potential future sales. Shortage of raw materials for production can cause disruption, rescheduling of production, retiming of maintenance periods, and laying off employees. Shortage costs might also include payments for positive action to remedy the shortage, such as expediting orders, sending out emergency orders, paying for special deliveries, and so on. It can be difficult to get reliable figures for any inventory costs, but shortage costs cause particular problems. This can include so many intangible factors that it is difficult to agree at a reasonable value. Most organizations take the view that shortages are expensive, so it is generally better to avoid them. In other words, they are willing to pay the relatively lower costs of carrying stock to avoid the relatively higher costs of shortages. Unfortunately, this defensive approach tends to increase the amount of stock, particularly when there is uncertainty. Now, let's explore an example. Jane is a purchasing clerk at ABC Company. She earns around $16,000 per year with other employment costs of $3,000 and has a budget of $6,200 for telephone, stationery, and postage. In a typical month, Jane places 100 orders. When goods arrive, there is an inspection that costs about $15 per order. The cost of borrowing money is 9%. The obsolescence rate is 5%, and the insurance and taxes are at 4%. What are the reorder and holding costs? The total number of orders a year is 1,200. The reorder costs includes all costs that occur for an order, and they are salary, $13.33 per order, employment cost, $2.50 per order, expenses, $5.17 per order, and inspection, which is $15 per order. Adding all those costs together gives the order cost of $36 per order. Holding costs include all costs that occur for holding costs and they total 18% of stock value a year. Changing value over time. At first sight, the value of something held in stock seems to remain constant over time. You paid $40 for a component, so this is its value, but it's easy to see that the value really changes. If you have a stock of newspapers, they have no value when the next edition arrives. Food gets out of date, and conversely, a tank of oil might rise in price, and inflation might increase the cost of materials. A particular problem here is obsolescence, which refers to a stock that has been kept in storage so long that it has little to no value. You can imagine this with spare parts for equipment that has been replaced or food that is past its sell-by date. There's a general trend for products to have shorter life cycles and a corresponding increase in the risks of obsolescence. Managers clearly want to avoid obsolescence, and the way to do this is to not keep materials for long periods, but to keep them moving as fast as possible. The rate of movement is usually measured in terms of turnover, where the stock turnover is the annual amount spent on stock divided by the average value of stock held. For example, if a company spends $120,000 a year on stock and the average value held is $20,000, its stock turnover is 6. This means that on average, items are replaced 6 times a year, and each unit stays on the shelf for 1/6 of a year or 2 months. If the value of an item changes over time, this raises question about the value of stock held. A company must know stock forms part of the assets that are recorded in its accounts. If the stock worth the amount you actually paid for it, the amount you would have to pay to replace it, the amount you can sell for it, or some other value? In practice, there are several accounting conventions, with the most common based on the amount actually paid. Variations on these are actual costs when it is possible to identify each unit remaining in stock and the amount paid for it. This works with a small number of expensive items such as cars and antiques, but most stock have larger numbers of identical units. First in, first out assumes that stock is sold in the order it was bought, so the remaining stock consists of the most recent purchases. Last in, first out assumes that the latest stock is used first, so the remainder is valued at early acquisition costs. Replacement costs. This is the full cost of the replacing units at the current price, and average cost, which finds the average cost over some period.